We've spent 8 episodes exploring one of the biggest questions humans have ever asked. What happens when we die? And maybe even bigger than that, what happens to consciousness when we die? From the very beginning, this series wasn't about finding one final answer. It was about exploring the major perspectives, science, spirituality, skepticism, philosophy, and letting you decide what to believe. Today, we're not bringing in another guest. Instead, I want to take a few moments to step back with you and look at the whole journey we've just taken and ask what it might mean for how we live. We began the series at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, where near-death experiences have been studied for decades. Their research shows patterns that are too consistent to dismiss. Tunnels, lights, out-of-body moments, life reviews. They gave us a foundation. NDEs are real. They happen all over the world, and they can be studied scientifically. Then we heard from Dr. Eben Alexander, whose own coma and NDE convinced him that consciousness doesn't depend on the brain at all. His story asked us to consider that death might be a doorway, and that consciousness could be far bigger than the physical body. We explored the life review with Bob Copps, who has gathered hundreds of accounts of people reliving their lives, not just from their own perspective, but from the eyes of those they've impacted. These stories raise the question, is there something in us that records and reflects everything we do? We sat with the voices of experiencers themselves, people who have been to the edge and back. For them, NDEs weren't just strange events. They were life-changing, often leading to more compassion, more courage, and a deep loss of fear about dying. Then we grounded ourselves in the brain with Dr. Kevin Nelson. He walked us through REM intrusion, oxygen deprivation, and the brain's ability to generate vivid, meaningful experiences under stress. His work reminded us that these moments don't have to be supernatural to be extraordinary. They can still tell us something powerful about how the mind creates reality. From there, we turned to philosophy with Dr. Susan Blackmore, who asked us to consider that what we call self might not be a fixed thing at all, but a story the brain continually weaves. And if the self is a process, maybe death is simply the end of that story, the last page turning, rather than something being taken away. Finally, we sat down with Helen Gretchen Jones, who reminded us that death isn't just a scientific or spiritual question, it's a human one. She showed us how cultures have created rituals and language to bring death back into the community, to approach it with dignity, and to face it together rather than alone. When I look back over all of these conversations, I notice a few themes that run through everything we've heard. First, mystery. Even with all our science, philosophy, and spirituality, death remains a threshold we cannot fully see past. Second, transformation. Whether people believe NDEs are brain events or spiritual journeys, they often come back changed, more compassionate, more awake, more alive. And third, meaning. NDEs and reflections on death seem to push us toward one essential question. What does it mean to live well? So now I turn this over to you. After hearing these perspectives, the researchers, the skeptics, the experiencers, the philosophers, what do you believe about consciousness? Do you think it ends with the brain, or do you feel that something continues? And how does your answer change the way you want to live right now? For me, the biggest takeaway from this series is this: whatever happens after death, life itself is a miracle. And if we pay attention to that miracle, if we love deeply, forgive quickly, and live fully awake, maybe that's the point, no matter what comes next. Thank you for joining me on this journey beyond the brain. I hope these conversations have given you space to think, to feel, and to wonder, and maybe to talk about these questions with the people you love. Because in the end, maybe what matters most isn't what we find out after we die, but what asking the question teaches us about how to live. I'm your host, Ryan Olekson, and this is Beyond 80%.